Some TV villains shout, rage, and draw attention the moment they walk on screen. Gustavo Fring, however, terrified audiences by doing the exact opposite. On the surface, he was a community man, the owner of Los Pollos Hermanos, serving fried chicken with a smile.
I'm delighted to hear that.
But beneath that calm exterior was one of the most dangerous criminal masterminds ever put on television. What made Gus stand out wasn't just his cruelty, but how invisible it seemed. He was a villain who didn't look like a villain, and that made him far more frightening than the Tuco Salamancas or the Jack Welkers of Breaking Bad. The Chicken Man.
Gentlemen, is everything to your satisfaction?
Fine, thanks.
When Walter White first sat down in Los Pollos Hermanos, he didn't meet a gun-toting drug boss. He met a polite man in a tidy suit. There was no sinister soundtrack, no dramatic reveal, just a businessman blending into the background. That's what made Gus so unnerving. True evil doesn't always storm through the door. Sometimes it shakes your hand and offers you a meal. You almost wanted to trust him, and that's exactly when he became most dangerous. But what made Gus so dangerous wasn't just the mask he wore in public. It was the pain he buried deep inside, the wound that turned him into something far more terrifying than a drug lord. The wound that created a monster. To understand Gus, you have to understand the wound that shaped him. Years before his empire, he had a partner, Max Arcaniega. Max wasn't just a business partner, he was family to Gus. During a cartel meeting with Hector Salamanca, Max was executed right in front of him, leaving Gus powerless to act. Hector didn't just kill Max, he made Gus watch every second of it. One moment, Max was speaking with hope in his voice. The next, he was on the ground, his life stolen in front of the man who loved him most. Gus stood frozen, his face calm only because he had no other choice. The man who would one day terrify everyone in his path was forced to stand there, helpless, swallowing his rage. That humiliation and grief never left him. It became the fire that burned beneath every decision he made from that day forward. And at the center of that fire was Hector Salamanca, the man who had taken Max from him, the man whose very existence became a reminder of that day. The twisted mind of Gus Fring. To Gus, Hector wasn't just another rival. He was the man who had humiliated him in front of the cartel, and that scar never faded. Killing Hector would have been too simple. Gus wanted something worse. He wanted him alive, broken, and forced to choke down humiliation with every breath. So Gus kept him breathing, but powerless. Trapped in a wheelchair, drooling, unable to speak, Hector became a ghost of the brutal man he once was. And Gus made sure that every loss the Salamancas suffered was rubbed in his face. Tuco was gunned down. The twins were cut to pieces. Bolsa was riddled with bullets, and Don Eladio and his men collapsed in a pool of blood. Gus carried those stories to Hector personally, standing over him and enjoying every single moment.
All dead.
He wanted Hector to see his entire bloodline erased while he could do nothing but glare. Every visit was like twisting the knife a little deeper. Every death in the Salamanca family wasn't just business, it was a message.
Now, the Salamanca name dies with you.
Gus was dismantling everything Hector had ever built, one corpse at a time. For Gus, this wasn't mercy. This was revenge, stretched out into years of torment. That obsession became his weakness. Yet Gus's story wasn't just about revenge. Behind every move was a strategy, a patient game that made him one of the most dangerous minds in television history. 2 steps ahead. From that moment, Gus wasn't just building an empire, he was planning a war. Unlike the loud, chaotic villains that came before, he fought it with patience and strategy, the kind that turned even the most feared killers into pawns. While most cartel bosses thrived on fear and intimidation, Gus relied on strategy. He never wasted energy on theatrics. He maneuvered quietly, always 2 steps ahead. The Salamanca twins proved that. Silent, merciless hitmen arrived to kill Walter White, and it seemed like the end was inevitable.
De la gente es Hank Schrader.
But Gus, instead of confronting them, redirected their fury toward Hank Schrader. The twins were eliminated. Hank barely survived, and Gus's operation continued untouched. It was a masterclass in turning enemies into pawns without ever firing a shot. Checkmate. That's why Gus was terrifying. He didn't fight battles head-on. He quietly removed threats one by one, like clearing pieces off a chessboard. The next piece to fall was Juan Bolsa.
You know what I think, Gustavo? I think you're behind all this.
Why would I do this?
Bolsa thought he held the leash, that Gus was the obedient businessman who played by cartel rules. He never realized Gus had already written his ending. When the raid came down, Bolsa was cornered, frantic, shouting orders as bullets tore through the walls. But even eliminating rivals wasn't enough. Gus's real target was still waiting, the man who had humiliated him all those years ago. Revenge for Max. Gus wasn't satisfied with just trimming the edges of the cartel. He wanted the heart of it, and his revenge would finally reach the man who started it all. The gathering at Don Eladio's home looked like a celebration, but it was really a funeral that none of them saw coming. They laughed, they drank, they trusted Gus enough to toast with him. And then the poison began its work. The party turned into a massacre in seconds. One by one, the men began coughing, choking, clawing at their throats. Bodies hit the floor, glasses shattered, and blood mixed with spilled tequila across the patio. Don Eladio watched his empire crumble in front of him, powerless, gasping for air as the poison ate through his body. And through it all, Gus stood tall, calm, and unshaken, locking eyes with him as if to say this was always how it would end. The box cutter.
This person doesn't know what the hell he's doing!
By now, Gus had destroyed empires with precision, dismantling his enemies as if it were routine. What truly made him terrifying, though, was how quickly he could turn on his own. Walt and Jesse found that out the hard way. Even the most calculated man could show brutality when needed. That moment came with Victor. He had been loyal, but in Gus's eyes he had slipped, and that was enough.
It's called a cook, because everything comes down to following a recipe. Simple, complicated, it doesn't matter.
In front of Walt and Jesse, Gus grabbed a box cutter and slit Victor's throat wide open, the spray of blood painting the room as his body collapsed. Jesse couldn't even process what he was seeing, and Walt sat frozen, knowing in that instant that Gus was unlike any enemy he had ever faced. It wasn't just Victor's gruesome death that terrified them. It was the realization that if Gus could do that to his own man, neither of them would ever be safe. Because in trying to dominate Walt, Gus unknowingly created something even more dangerous: Heisenberg, the monster he created.
Are you asking me if I ordered the murder of a child?
The irony of Gus's brilliance is that it created the one thing he didn't anticipate: Heisenberg. By forcing Walt into a corner, he awakened a rival just as cunning and far more reckless. Their war ended in the most unforgettable way possible. Gus entered Hector Salamanca's room with his usual confidence, unaware of the bomb waiting for him. When the explosion tore through the nursing home, Gus even managed to step out, straighten his tie, and keep his composure before collapsing, half his body gone. That final image defined him. Even in death, Gus Fring carried himself with eerie control, as though the mask of civility could never be removed. He wasn't terrifying because he shouted or raged. He was terrifying because he didn't need to. He showed us that the scariest kind of evil is the kind that smiles, shakes your hand, and waits patiently for the moment you least expect. If you enjoyed this dive into Gus Fring's twisted mind, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got more deep dives into TV's most unforgettable characters waiting for you.